Manufacturers are at an inflection point right now here in 2026 as they navigate their modernization efforts, whether that's ERP, AI, other types of technologies, or some combination of all the above. And that's what we're going to talk about today is ERP and AI in the world of manufacturing and how one size does not fit all. And we're also going to talk about a lot of different things related to options you have in the marketplace. A lot of times software vendors might indicate to you that there's only one path forward, but it turns out there's a lot of different paths that manufacturers have, a lot of different options and alternatives. And that's what we want to explore here today in today's live discussion. So I'm here live in Miami at the global headquarters of QAD, which is where our guest is joining from today. And I have the privilege of doing this live on site, which is great because I get to be outside the normal podcast studio and actually be in a cool office with a great view of the ocean and all the stuff that we don't have in Denver where our podcast studio is. So it's great to be here with you here today. But joining me is the CEO of QAD Software, and I'll let him explain who QAD is here in just a moment. But Sanjay, thanks for being here today.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Eric. Thanks for joining us in Miami. I hope you enjoyed the real heat that Miami brings. But no, we're happy to have you here and great to share some perspectives. Well, QAD Redzone, we are a AI manufacturing platform company, and we are serving manufacturers. Our whole mission is to make manufacturers champions of manufacturing. And we do that through our platform, which basically has three components, really. It has Redzone, that is empowering the front line, so connected workforce capability. We have Adaptive, which is our ERP, which is our, the intelligent backbone. And then we have Champion AI, that is our agentic orchestration layer that covers both Redzone and ERP and is embedded into the workflow. So being able to deliver agents and AI capabilities to our clients.
Great. Yeah. Great. So real quickly, before I jump into, I want to understand a little bit more about your background and how you got to QAD and your journey so far. But real quickly for the audience, those of you watching here today, if you've got questions along the way, please drop them in the chat. I'm watching all the major platforms here, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, Facebook, as well as TikTok. So wherever you're watching, please drop your comments in the chat. And in fact, let us know where you're joining from today. What city and country are you joining from today? I'd love to hear where you're joining. QAD is a global company. We have a global audience. We'd love to hear where you're at here today. But Sanjay, tell us a little bit about your journey so far, because you're a little over a year into your journey here at QAD since taking over the company. Not taking over the company, but leading the company. Let's put it that way. Tell me about your upbringing. How did you start? How did you end up in this space?
Great. Well, look, I started serving as the CEO in March 2025. So as you said, just a little over 14 months, and been an amazing journey so far. Prior to that, I was the CEO of another software company called Software AG. It's a German multinational company doing database and integration application products, roughly about $1 billion in size, 5,000 people, based out of Darmstadt near Frankfurt. And I led that company through a large transformation from, kind of sort of an heritage situation to a subscription SaaS company, and led it back to growth. It hadn't grown for 8 years. And prior to that, I was at IBM for about 16 years, mainly focused on manufacturing and industrial companies, helping them implement technology and leverage technology for achieving their ambitions. And from education, I'm an engineer. I started my career in Honda, as a trainee, working on the shop floor assembling engines. So I really learned a lot from the shop floor, and that's, I guess, where my love for manufacturing grew. And why am I at QAD? Well, I think at QAD we have an amazing opportunity. We have a company that's has been existing for almost 40 years, serving manufacturers. And I think that there's an opportunity here to take that trust that we have with customers, that manufacturing DNA, deep domain expertise, and combine that with an AI platform to be able to bring these capabilities to clients. So I think that's a truly unique opportunity.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you guys are doing as a company. We'll get into it here in a moment. But we were talking last night at dinner as we were preparing for this discussion. And one thing I mentioned, I'm meaning it as a compliment, is that this does not look like QAD that I recognize from 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that's, I think, a good thing. And you guys are taking it in a really interesting direction that we'll get into here today. But just to sort of set up the conversation here and talk about the manufacturing space in general, what is it about what most what are manufacturers telling you about what they need and want from ERP modernization here in 2026 that other software vendors and most software vendors are missing, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I've in my early part of joining QAD, I literally spent most of the days on the road, really going and meeting customers. So I think I met over 100 CEOs, and I would say, there are kind of a couple of observations that come out from these conversations. I think the first thing is that AI has kind of really changed the order of investment. If you think 5 years ago, companies were thinking about, hey, first we'll invest in infrastructure, then we'll invest in applications and analytics, and then maybe somewhere we might do something with AI. Today, most of these CEOs are basically saying, hey, I want to skip all of that. I want to go straight to AI. And so, that changes the way we as software companies and, providers have to think differently. So that's kind of one thing. AI has really changed the order of investment. I think the second thing is that, manufacturers don't really have an ERP problem. Nobody's really talking to me about that they've got a fundamental ERP problem. I think, what really they really have is a decision-making problem. And so there's no shortage of data in manufacturing. You and I know, we spoke about that last night. So they have dashboards, they have, some of them have AI pilots that are going, but there are very few that have fast decisions, that can make fast decisions. And so I think, this is really about, not so much more data, but it's about the ability to make fast decisions. And so ERP is not the whole architecture, it's part of that architecture. So that's kind of the second thing that we are getting. And then the third thing is that, AI is literally becoming the new user interface. So, it's no longer like screens or transactions or menus. It's pretty much conversations. It's pretty much agents and content or intent. And so, that whole thing, if you say maybe 20 years ago, ERP replaced paper,
Right.
Today AI is replacing clicks. So literally, it's kind of sort of the way of engagement is changing. We're not going to spend time and talking about which is the new application somebody has to learn. I think the real thing is now that you can just simply ask business questions. And
Right.
that's, I think, fundamental. So I think those are the kind of the three things that, I'm picking up from manufacturers. And I think that really makes us as, technology providers really think hard how to bring value to our clients, rather than the traditional, let's go for an ERP implementation or a migration,
Yeah, there's some more deliberate purpose to
Yeah.
it. And I think leading into the next question, there's a couple different schools of thought in the industry. You've got the one school of thought that says ERP should, in a perfect world, be standard. It should be one size fits all. It should handle all of your needs. You should be able to roll out one single ERP system to do everything you need it to. And you should be able to apply that same system across different industries, across different competitors within the same industry. And then there's another school of thought that says ERP simply can't be everything to everyone. You might need to customize. You might need best of breed. You might need multiple systems, composable ERP, whatever it is. So two very different schools of thought. Some vendors are pursuing the one size fits all strategy, and you guys are not. So tell me about where you, just in general, aside from QAD as a company, just in general, how should we be thinking about this notion of an ERP system being one size fits all, one single system?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think, our view on that is we don't think manufacturing is a one size fits all. We think manufacturing is quite specific to an organization, to a company, to even to a plant level. So, plants have different characteristics, different ways of operating. Geographies and regions have different, factors that have to be taken into account. So we definitely believe that there has to be flexibility in the ability to really help a manufacturer, serve the business and be able to deliver for the business. And so for that, it's important to support the manufacturers with certain amount of, let's say, unique capabilities that they need. And they build these capabilities mostly on around the templates, around the benchmarks. And so, one way we could think about it is, oh my God, all of that is not good, and therefore we should bring them all back to a core clean setup. The way we look at it is there is a reason and a rationale behind manufacturers building those capabilities. Either they don't exist today or they are their secret sauce. And so we firmly believe that our way to help customers is to go to where they are, help them with that unique differentiation that they have, and make sure that they can continue using that unique differentiation. So we're not, kind of pushing customers into a standard template.
Right. Yeah, and I think that in some ways runs very counter to what a lot of ERP vendors are pursuing in terms of, you mentioned the word clean core, fit to standard, vanilla, especially in today's cloud environment. Software vendors in general are going to scale their products better if we would all just conform to the software. But in manufacturing especially, I would argue it's not realistic. I mean, you've got, you mentioned the differentiators and the differences between different manufacturers. Even if you just look at the types of manufacturing, you've got process versus discrete manufacturing, you've got industrial manufacturing versus consumer products, make to order versus make to stock, engineer to order. So all these different variations of manufacturing that it's nearly impossible to have one size fits all. How is that message resonating with manufacturers as far as giving them options? Is that what they're craving? What are you seeing there?
Well, I think most manufacturers are kind of used to hearing the message that, hey, you have to do a lot of disruption to get innovation. And so we really spent time listening to our customers, and we thought about this. If we were to just force our customers to do a migration, that's a lot of disruption to the business. That's a lot of time that needs to be spent for them to be able to get access to the AI capabilities. So for us, the important thing is to meet our customer where they are. So our approach is, it doesn't matter what release you are on, customer, whatever older technology you might have. What we would give you is Champion AI, our agentic AI capability that can integrate and can work with any level of your platform or your capabilities. So immediately you can get access to agents, and you can get access to these use cases that can drive P&L impact. And over a period of time, you can, of course, work on your tech debt. And so it's at a pace that's acceptable to you. And that effectively means that you don't need massive business disruption to avail innovation, to get your hands on innovation. So that's the way we are approaching it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because there's so many times we hear with our clients, whether it's legacy SAP or Oracle or Microsoft clients, for example, that they're using one of the legacy on-prem systems, and they're being told by their vendors and their system integrators, well, we've got all these great capabilities. You just need to migrate your core ERP system to our more modern version. And after you spend millions, tens of millions in years of time and effort, then maybe, just maybe, you'll get access to AI. Whereas you guys are kind of flipping that, saying, well, hold on, if you've got a legacy environment and it's working okay, it may not be perfect, it may not be the sexiest thing in the world, you can layer in this orchestration layer of AI to leverage what you've already invested in, right?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the other things that when we listen to our customers, we realize that when we look at our customers that are running our older versions of our ERP itself, part of the challenge for them to move and the disruption is in these unique skills and capabilities that they've built on the side around the ERP. And so these are, as I said, some of them are, differentiation. They are the reasons why they win. They are their secret sauce. And so we built a tool, which is effectively an AI tool that allows them to capitalize and understand all these unique capabilities that they've built. So it can write out the specs of that custom development in English, because these things were built a long time back. So the specs don't even exist. So first of all, they can know what their secret sauce is. And then they can add to it, they can change it, modify it, and have that in a low-code, no-code platform as they're using. But what it means is this tool allows them to continue building their secret sauce, right? And of course, we are looking at the industry and how the industry is moving and what's the greatest innovation that we can bring and how we bring AI to our customers. But there are some unique things about their own operations that they can continue to keep innovating upon. And I think this combination of, the knowledge of across the industry and that local expertise and local domain knowledge, the combination is really powerful. And that helps companies win, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting how, you talk about winning, secret sauce, differentiators. I think those words oftentimes get lost in this industry. We talk too much about ourselves. We talk too much about the technology. Like, our technology is awesome. It's great. Just use best practices, use it off the shelf, out of the box, without, to your point, meeting a customer where they are. And I think it's a bit arrogant for technologists to assume that their technology is the end all be all answer for everyone, without recognizing, well, you might be on an old outdated system, but you built something secret to you.
Correct.
Let's figure out how to translate that
Yeah.
into the future state tech environment. I think that's something that gets lost.
Yeah,
We forget
absolutely.
the customer and all this talk about
Correct.
technology.
And technology, if it doesn't manifest into outcomes or into an impact to your productivity or your P&L or your delivery to your customer, what benefit? What good is that
Right.
technology, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, you're spending a lot of money to modernize, but you're doing a you're doing a lesser job satisfying your customers. Some questions coming in from the audience here I want to get to here.
Sure.
This is from this comment is on YouTube. ERP needs to be built around the business, otherwise you have to build the business around the ERP.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're saying. Is
Absolutely.
Do we change the software to fit the business?
Correct.
Change the business to fit the software, or
Yeah.
is it a combination of both?
Yeah, we really have to think that AI gives us an opportunity to really think about software in a different way, right? I think we're moving to a world which is more service as a software rather than software as a service, which is the way SaaS was. And why I say it is service as a software, because we are forced now to think along the processes in manufacturing, whether it's procure to pay, whether it is made to order. We look at the processes and we then think through, how do we apply AI and agents to that process? How do human beings and agents coexist within that? How do you run that process now in a regulated environment? Make sure that there is enough trust, there is enough governance, there's enough traceability, auditability. Like if you're in automotive or you are in med tech or you are in food and beverage, you need to know, how decisions have been made along that process. So how do you create that level of efficiency and automation combined with human, kind of human decision making and human validation to be able to deliver that process in an efficient way? So it's almost like software now is it's almost like serving the outcome. And so we spend so much time teaching people how to use software. Now we have tech like AI that really learns how people work.
Right.
So that's a totally different way, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Oh, here's an interesting question. This is from Christopher on LinkedIn. Christopher says, wouldn't the end all be all be that tech lets the customer dynamically define the business as they see fit? So in other words, the software being flexible enough that you can use it and change and pivot however you need to versus one monolithic, rigid way of doing things.
I think that's absolutely solid. And the thing is, when you think about manufacturing, so manufacturing is 24/7. Right. So you do need a certain level of predictability, quality, process, discipline that has to be run in a certain way to make sure that you get an outcome and an output. So there are certain processes that will be needed in manufacturing. But as long as you have those core processes defined very well, then there is absolute relevance of this flexibility, which can allow the manufacturer to adjust to the changing business needs, right? And this is where our tool comes in where we say, hey, we will make sure that these processes are, of course, in the right way so that things in a regulated industry or a governed way can happen. But at the same time, you have the flexibility to be able to move very quickly and create capabilities that meet your business needs. So you don't need to every time run a 3-year or a 2-year transformation program to meet your business requirements.
Right, exactly. Good point. So when you went out to talk to all these different customers, you mentioned you talked to over 100 different organizations, customers, their CEOs. You got a lot of feedback from them. That's sort of your first, I think you were saying last night, that was your first 100 days plus on the job, was let me just go talk to customers and understand what their needs are, how they're using your product suite and whatnot. You brought them all together. What did they tell you about budget, AI talent, and which partners they actually trust?
Yeah, I have been speaking to a lot of CFOs also and CEOs. And, recently we brought 15 of these execs together in Miami in May. And we did a roundtable around AI. And so there were no presentations. It was just a peer-to-peer conversation. And there were some core messages that I took away. One was that, they said clearly there is no extra budget, right? We don't have extra money for AI. But what we are going to do is we're going to carve out something like about 7 to 10% from our OPEX IT budgets, and we are going to invest in AI. So we're going to do AI initiatives, but very important for those initiatives is they have a clear outcome and clear ROI. So within 90 days, if they cannot deliver outcome, we are prepared to cut those initiatives off. So that was one thing, that there is going to be money that they are spending on specific AI initiatives. The second thing was, hey, we don't really have all this AI talent in-house. So we can't really build everything ourselves. So it's no good to get lots of platform generic capabilities and then having to build everything ourselves. We don't have that AI talent, and it's not that easy to source this AI talent in the market. Half of them are being obviously hired by Google and others. So we are looking for solutions that are relevant for us and have been built with the consideration to our requirements. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing was, hey, trust is a very important point for us. We are operating in regulated industry, so we're not okay with just some generic, kind of AI layers or generic AI solutions that are built somewhere in isolation and then are going to operate in our 24/7 highly regulated environment. No, we will trust our partners who we have worked with for many years, who understand our process and our governance and our regulations, and we will trust their AI solutions first. So that's kind of a clear message, and also an important one for us, which is a great opportunity for us, small window within which we have to, of course, serve our customers. But if we can bring the right kind of AI solutions to our customers, clearly there is money that they have allocated to be able to drive, and they place a high value on trust.
Right. What about the whole trade-off between CapEx spending and OpEx, with this new model? How are manufacturers treating that, or how are they viewing that shift from, the old on-premise systems that you would invest capital costs or capital investments up front, you depreciate it, you own the asset, versus now you've got this ongoing OpEx cost with the cloud model?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that is definitely, kind of changing people's perceptions. Everybody had a perception that cloud is the only way. I think with AI, that is changing. On-prem is no longer what I would call a dirty word, or, oh my God,
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's a combination. Of course, for certain capabilities, you are going to use cloud. But with AI, you can capitalize and use your investment that you've already made. You may call that legacy. You may call that, your tech debt or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the reality is, with AI and with the capabilities, you can actually capitalize and leverage that. And of course, do the changes that you want to do at your own pace. But that's quite important. So on-prem is not a big issue. We are now able to deal with multiple kind of environments. A hybrid world is going to be the optimal world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I like that you say that on-premise is not a dirty word,
No,
because
yeah.
I get a lot of cringy looks sometimes when I say the word on-prem. Say it's not a terrible thing. I think eventually the pendulum may swing back to more of a balanced
Absolutely.
cloud versus on-prem, especially as customers start to realize the relative inflexibility of the SaaS model for something like manufacturing.
Yeah.
Now, if you're talking about AP, GL, sort of vanilla back office processes, sure, that's ripe for cloud. But when you talk about manufacturing, the configure, price, quote process, the overall material planning process, all the stuff that makes you unique and helps you build your products better and faster and cheaper, that's the stuff I feel like the on-prem and having that flexibility the pendulum might swing back. What about, let's go back to this thread of meeting you where you are. You talked about meeting your customers where they are. Why does that matter more now than it did even 2 years ago? And why is modernization not the same as migration?
I think it's very important because, I don't think manufacturers have 5 years for transformations. So if you go to a manufacturer and tell them today, hey, you've got to do a lot of this business disruption, that's what you got to do first before you're going to get access on AI and you're going to be able to use AI. I think that is something that manufacturers just don't have the time for. And so for them, it's absolutely important that they are talking to partners that can meet them where they are.
Right.
And so, as I said, AI has changed the order of investment. They are very focused on using AI for productivity, for efficiency, for safety, for quality, right here, right now, not in 3 years, not in 2 years. So, there is no appetite to say, hey, let's do a migration and an ERP upgrade and an ERP change. We'll spend 1.5, 2 years on that. And then, no, in 90 days, I want to see outcomes. So I think that is the reason why meeting the customers exactly where they are is so important. And so for us, what we built is what we call champion pace. For me, it's very important that every use case that we build has a very clear ROI, so has an impact either to, let's say, the top line, or has a quantifiable impact to the P&L. We're able to show that, demonstrate that with examples, etc. But then the next important thing is that it can be done in 90 days. That we can actually get to the client, deploy it, show the customer that it works in 90 days. So there's a clear outcome, and that's what we call champion pace. And that methodology has been built with two aspects to it. One is that agents are used to be able to do the deployment much faster. So you're able to do data migration, configuration, usage, onboarding, etc., much faster. And then the second thing is we always deliver these agents and these AI capabilities with a coaching attached to it. So for that 90 days, there will be a coach from our side who's basically a person from manufacturing background who teaches the people on the shop floor and in the manufacturing environment how to use that AI capability. Because once you get somebody used to using the AI capability, there's no going backward.
Right.
Then suddenly they're kind of like sort of the mundane tasks are taken care of by the agents, like all the preparation, reconciliation, the checking, and all that base work is done by the agent, and then that person can actually work on actions, can work on decisions. So you change that engagement for that person also. Suddenly they feel a lot more empowered. They're spending their time on value add, rather than all that mundane activities that they have to do, in multiple screens and multiple clicks, So
yeah, very interesting. I'm curious to hear from the audience too. I'd love to hear your feedback on this whole concept of we were talking about on-prem not being a dirty word, some of the limitations and benefits of cloud. Love to hear from you. What do you think the future of cloud versus on-prem is? Are we past that? Is on-prem dead? Is cloud the future? Are there limitations? Love to hear your feedback on that. And also love to hear feedback too, hear from the audience on meeting customers where they are and recognizing where they are today versus where they could be. Both very important, right? I mean, we don't want to just get stuck in the past and say, let's just keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Let's not worry too much about modernization. That's not what you're saying. You're saying we've got to start somewhere.
Correct.
Let's start where they are, not this future state vision and expect them to jump.
No, absolutely. I believe that, AI is here right now, and it can deliver a lot of value for customers exactly where they are. They don't need to do a lot of disruption to get here and then apply AI. That's what I'm trying to say. That doesn't mean that you are not modernizing. You're obviously modernizing the way you do things, the way you look at productivity, efficiency, etc. You're getting those benefits while funding some of the tech debt, right? So some of the benefits that you get can be used as funds to eliminate your tech debt. And that's a better and more palatable message to a CFO, for example, or a CEO, right? And or if you just come in and say, hey, I got to spend millions on migration first, and then I'll get some benefits of AI, that's a very different message.
You might run out of money and time and patience by the time that comes around. I've heard you say in keynotes and presentations that you've given here over the last year, you've talked quite a bit about ERP being a system of record, and AI being a potential system of action. Can you help us differentiate? And this gets to the role of ERP versus AI and recognizing maybe they have different roles. Can you explain your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think today, the way ERPs are, they are basically systems of record. They are telling you what has happened. Whereas, with AI now, we can actually shift the systems of records literally to a system of action, where AI can help you sense, detect, and decide in real time. And so, you're changing that whole, it's almost in some ways you were planning your enterprise resources. Now in real time, you can allocate them, right? Because you can actually make changes and you can decide based on what are the constraints. Now, manufacturing is all about constraints.
Right.
You got inbound supply constraints, you got manufacturing capacity constraints, you got amount of labor that you have, then you've got the outbound shipping constraints, all of them. So manufacturing is all about how do you produce within those constraints and how do you optimize your OEE or your productivity, all of those metrics within those constraints. So, AI can help you look at making decisions to optimize those constraints.
Right.
Say you had 10 orders and they are now delayed because of inbound shipments. Which ones are you going to ship first? Which ones are you going to ship OTIF full, and which ones do you incur lots of costs on your margin? So, AI can help you decide, hey, maybe the first 4 ones, you better ship them on time because there's contractual penalties. The next 6, you can go to the customer and renegotiate the dates because that would help you with your profitability, and you won't have such a such a challenge with the conversation with the customers. That kind of decision making AI can help you do. In traditional ARP, we don't do that. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Here's a question here this is actually from Third Stage Consulting. I know them. Do you think all vendors will follow suit and offer on-prem as an option, or are we past that?
Well, I think, as I said, the world is hybrid. I think the most important thing is meet the customer where they are and understand what's valuable and relevant for the client. And so not for all customers, it's going to be relevant that they have to shift to cloud. They have to always do cloud to avail certain capabilities. They might have some applications on cloud. They might have some on-prem. Our job is to make sure that we can bring AI to our clients and allow them to travel and do that journey at a pace that's okay for their business. It's not causing chaos and disruption to their business. And so the business model itself is then challenged. I think that's what's most important. So I don't think either is going out of play. I think both are going to exist. On-prem is going to exist, and so is. And if you think about security and there will be always the necessity for manufacturers to think about what's relevant for their differentiation, what's their secret sauce. And are they going to allow external models to train on there? So we are very focused on making sure that our customers' data is very well protected and is not training generic models.
Right. Yeah, very, very important, especially when it comes to data privacy and whatnot. Another question. This is from Uramin on YouTube. How can organizations ensure that AI recommendations within ERP systems are transparent and explainable to end users? And maybe I'll add one more word: accurate. How can you ensure it's transparent, explainable, accurate? How do you bridge that gap?
I love that question, by the way, because I think there's always a risk that we use AI once, twice. Just look at us as individuals when we use ChatGPT or we're using Gemini or whatever. The first time we look at the answer, we challenge it a bit. The second time we look at it, it looks okay. Third time we say, was pretty okay. And then the fourth time we don't challenge it anymore because the question. So that's a risk, of course. And therefore we have to make sure that when we are in a manufacturing environment, we don't have that kind of situation. People don't just switch off. And so there is a certain level of automation that can be done. But what we have done is, as we lay out our AI embedded into the workflows, we have human in the loop. Always. We have human in the loop at the major decision-making points. And then there's an 80-20. 80% of the decisions are either reversible or don't have that much regrettable cost, but 20% have a lot of regrettable costs. So we make sure that the human can decide. Some of those 80% they can automate because they feel it's okay within a certain boundaries and limits. The AI can automate it. And then there are those decisions that the human will be in the loop to make. So that's kind of the way, first of all, in terms of making sure that there is control, there's transparency, and there's and then I think the second thing is really about education. Making sure that people understand AI is there to empower the human being. AI is not there to replace the human being. AI is there to empower the human being. We are in manufacturing, by the way, I think we spoke at dinner. In manufacturing in the US, we have 500,000, 500,000 open jobs today. So we don't have a challenge of we need to reduce the number of people in manufacturing. We actually have to attract more talent. So what we are focused on is let's empower the people on the shop floor. Let's make them 3 to 4x more powerful, which means that they can do a lot more. They can create a lot more capacity, address that shortfall that exists in US manufacturing today.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think so much of where AI and ERP technology in general is focused is on the back office. It's the finance users, the people in procurement, important people. But if you think about it, for most manufacturers, that's what, 10% of your workforce, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
The other 90% are out on the shop floor. They're doing they're doing real work. No offense to the white collar. We're all white collar workers here, right? So no offense to the white collar workers, but there's people that do actual work, real work. And I think that's interesting that you're viewing technology from that perspective, because I think they get lost a lot. Those end users, those mass numbers of people that run your business, they often get lost in the shuffle because we're so focused on the back office people.
I think you raise a very good point. I think all the media coverage and everything that you hear in news is all negative. It's all about, oh my God, AI is going to drive us all out of jobs and we won't have anything to do. Well, I can tell you one thing, really, after meeting so many CEOs, so many companies and traveling so much, I can tell you that manufacturing is a very exciting place to be.
Yeah.
There's real excitement in this industry, and AI is changing manufacturing. I think you have a lot of convergence of AI, robotics, supply chain, resilience, all of these things coming together, which makes, I think, for the younger talent, it makes manufacturing is a very exciting industry to think of in terms of a career. And so that's another thing that we are also very passionate about. I think building solutions leveraging AI to make them intuitive, make them Apple-esque. I know that's not a word probably,
Right.
but
I know what
to
you
make
mean,
them just like Apple phones. Like where kids can just step into manufacturing. If you work with our Redzone software, you will see one of the most attractive things about Redzone is the way people can work with it.
Yeah.
And so, young talent on the shop floor, they love working with it because there are no paper, there's no pencil, there's nothing manual anymore. It's all, the dashboards are there, the AI is in front of them, the OE is shown, the productivity is there. So it really creates a different environment where I think younger talent can be attracted into.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because not to go back too far in time, but one event about 5 years ago during COVID made me realize how disconnected the technological world is from manufacturing. And this has to do this is a faux pas on my part, it was probably, I don't know, May or June of 2020. So things were still fairly locked down, and a lot of white collar people were still working at home. People were having debates online about whether the future of work would entail working at home and work from anywhere. And in the meantime, I remember I had this call with the COO and on camera, and I'm working at home. And he's in the office. He comes rushing in. He's a few minutes late. He comes rushing in with his orange safety vest on, and he's like, "Sorry, we had an emergency out on the shop floor." He had his mask on. He pulls his mask down because he's finally in his office.
Sure.
And my dogs start barking in the background, right? And I just remember thinking, I'm not connected to this guy. I'm sitting here at home, in my pajamas, working from home. He doesn't care that the world's shut down. He's got a job to do, and it made me realize, like, in the world of technology and consulting, it gets really easy to get disconnected from where these people are every day. They're not working from home. They've actually have to go, like I said, do real work. And I say that because my parents are blue collar workers. My whole family is blue collar. I'm kind of the odd man out in our family, so I can relate to it. But I think it's really important as technologists, and when we view technology and digital strategy and all that stuff, I think it's important we think about, like, who are these people and what do they need and want, and what's useful to them.
Yeah. I mean, I think what a great story, because I think it tells you the importance of you have to be on the shop floor to feel the pulse. As I said, I started as a trainee and kind of got to see how engines are built. And on a shop floor, there is literally, it's like sweat, pressure, wrenches, basically things that are happening there in real time. And there is no hiding. You cannot hide from that pressure. It's not as though you could send a memo or an email to somebody. You just have to deal with the situation there itself.
Yeah, really well said. I'm going back and forth between audience questions and my questions here. Let's talk about the biggest ERP vendor in the world as far as market share, especially among big manufacturers, is SAP.
Sure.
So let's talk about SAP for a minute. SAP is pushing customers to S/4HANA to access AI like Joule and Joule 2.0 that they just announced recently. And this gets back to what you were talking about before, about meeting customers where they are versus focusing on the technology in a technology first mindset. But when you view how SAP is pushing customers to S/4HANA so they can get the advantage of Joule and Joule 2.0, how is QAD's approach deliberately different? I mean, you guys aren't taking that approach. What's different about your strategy? Why do you think that's potentially better for some people?
Yeah, look, I mean, SAP is a great company, but I think we have different approaches. We have our new release Adaptive, which we launched in November, and is very successful. We have 20 odd customers that are already live on that. We have pipeline of 200 customers that are wanting to adopt, but we are not pushing our customers to migrate. We are not telling our customers that that's the only way for you to access AI. We proactively went and told our customers that no, we're going to be able to deliver you AI right now. That means our Champion AI platform, our orchestration layer, can integrate with whatever release you are on. Of course, it's fully integrated with the Adaptive, and that is just comes as instantly available. But But even if you are on a much older release, our Champion AI agents will be able to work with that. Our orchestration layer will be able to work with that. And that allows you to take the benefit of specific use cases, whether it's on the procurement side or it's on the productivity side or it's on the inventory cost optimization side. That's the same thing with customers that have other ERPs. We've told many of our clients have other, they have Oracle, they have JD Edwards, or they might have ECC. We've told our customers, look, we are more than happy to get you AI right now and help you with that step. You can still continue using your older releases, whatever ERP you are on. But this orchestration layer can work with any ERP, can get you those agents, and can get you that benefit right now. And I think that's a message that customers are very happy to hear. Because the other side of it is, oh my God, I've got to do a year full of transformation, or plus, I don't even know if it's 1 year. I mean, how many projects never deliver on time. So, I think that's the message that manufacturers want to hear. They're all running 24/7 under severe capacity constraints. And so they want to be able to deliver, get innovation while, kind of not disrupting their business. And one of the customers that we have worked with is Tenneco. And this is a client that has had an installed base of ECC, and I've actually chosen to migrate away from that and use Adaptive, but also get access to our AI solutions. And so, that's what we believe. Meet the customer and focus on that value for the customer.
Yeah. And use the word disruption. I want to come back to that because that's really important, because I think that's where we see a lot of clients struggling too, is they know they have an opportunity to modernize. They know they have an opportunity to leverage AI, but they don't want to get into a situation where they have to decide, am I willing to shut down operations or not be able to ship product for a certain amount of time, not be able to run payroll, not be able to close the books. They don't want that heartache and the headache. In some cases, they just went through it 5 or 10 years ago. Why would I go through that again just to maybe get to the point where I could potentially use AI? Whereas you're saying, well, hold on, what if you didn't do that? What if you could use your legacy platform, the good, bad, the ugly? I know it's not perfect, but you could start to get some immediate value without the headaches. And the
this is a very important aspect and point for John Brown, the CEO of Tenneco. And one of the things was very clear: I don't want any business disruption. I want to be able to do this change and this leverage of AI and capabilities without disrupting my business. And so, when we look at the deploys and how they've gone, the engagement or usage of the software has gone from 50 to 93%.
Wow.
And so you can imagine, the previous software was not being used. Literally half of it was not used. It's gone to 93%, and that's done without any downtime or any kind of disruption to the business. I think that's what is really valuable to manufacturers.
Yeah, you think about that. I mean, how many companies out there, I'd love to hear from the audience too. I mean, how many of you are using a legacy ERP system that, again, maybe it's not perfect, it may not be the sexiest thing in the world, but how much of it are you leaving on the table and not even using? It's shelfware, it's modules you haven't deployed. Maybe it's modules you have deployed, but no one knows how to use it, or you just haven't figured out how to tap into the power of it. And here we are talking about, well, let's upgrade you again, when I haven't even figured out how to fully leverage and get ROI out of that existing
Where is the ROI, right? To do another upgrade on that when actually your people are just using 50% of the existing software. So I think this is where I think software companies are going wrong, in thinking about, hey, the only way to take customers to innovation is to get them through these expensive upgrades. I think there is a smarter way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little more practically then about the orchestration layer. How does that orchestration layer let a customer who's on ECC with SAP, for example, how could an SAP customer that's using ECC start using agents and AI without having to rip out ECC and upgrade to S/4HANA or another ERP solution?
I mean, the way we've designed our agents is in such a way that they are ERP neutral. So they are focused on specific workflows and data that they have to have access to, and then once they have access to that, they're able to run. The agent's able to run, and it's able to create those specific decisions or these outcomes that the agent is targeted to do. For example, we have an agent around procurement side, and effectively, when you think about any manufacturer, they have a lot of effort and people that are focused on direct procurement. And these buyers are spending their time, of course, setting up suppliers on their procurement tool, whatever that application is. They're issuing the contracts. And so that first formal process happens through the tool. But then Following that, all of the changes to lead times, disruptions, all of that communication is on email. So a buyer is spending literally 50% of their time trying to sort out through this communication, trying to figure out what's the impact of any changes that suppliers are sending them to delivery times, lead times, to inventory costs. Where is the inventory sitting? How do I deal with not having any stockouts and production issues? That's the amount of time the buyers are spending on it. So we have an agent that works on what's called the messy inbox, and it combines the data from the messy inbox and the procurement too. And it effectively helps the buyer and saves literally 40 to 50% of the buyer time. So that effectively means that buyer in that manufacturing facility can now spend their time on proactively thinking about how to improve that whole production run and how to help the production planning and the supply chain. And rather than spending all that time trying to kind of sort out his messy inbox. Now that's a clear productivity uplift and they can either, of course, reduce their cost of procurement, or they can actually use that capacity for additional increase in growth that they would have to hire otherwise. So that's kind of sort of an example. But our agents are designed like that. The orchestration layer that can orchestrate multiple agents across the end-to-end process is also designed in such a way that it can work with ECC or it can work with any other ERP system. We work with the customer and we kind of understand the customer's landscape and their environment, and then how our agents will work in that existing environment. It's a 90-day deploy, basically. So again, everything is focused on 90 days. That we can show that outcome to our customer in 90 days.
Right. Well, one thing that this brings up in my mind is you think about, when I'm talking to executives at manufacturers or any organization, one of the key strategic criteria for choosing how you're going to go forward with your modernization efforts, I think, should entail flexibility, optionality, and just making sure you're not locked in, locked into one vendor. And those are all very much interrelated. And for a lot of customers, if they do go down the path of let's go to the newest, latest, and greatest cloud solution, like SAP, for example, going from ECC to S4, even if S4 is potentially more powerful and gives you more capabilities than you had with ECC, and even if the implementation isn't a headache, even if it doesn't go over budget over time, which is extremely unlikely, but it does happen occasionally, even if that's all true, you're still somewhat locked in now. You further double down on that ecosystem, and SAP has the API policy. We were talking about this last night. With S4HANA, you are very limited to what integrations, what AI tools you can bring into S4HANA. But while you're still on ECC, the good news is you have control. You have flexibility, you have optionality.
Absolutely.
You can do the things you're talking about. So I think that's a consideration a lot of customers need to think about, is before you move to your potential latest and greatest of your incumbent system, you've got to think about,
you end up with, right?
Yeah, are you too locked in? Is that going to increase your cost long term? Is it going to limit your flexibility? Are you potentially tethering yourself to a vendor that may not be the future of ERP anymore? And I would argue that a lot of the incumbents now are not going to be the same incumbents in 5 or 10 years, because this is being so disrupted. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I absolutely, I'm aligned with your thinking, in terms of, first of all, I think when we started thinking about how we want to serve the customers, I stopped benchmarking against the traditional ERP companies. I believe we are benchmarking ourselves against AI manufacturing companies or AI software companies. That's a different category. We've got to think differently, and as I said for us, it's not about delivering an application. It's about delivering, an ability that the manufacturing company can ask business questions. That's what we see Champion AI as, an ability to ask business questions. Now, back to your point about the lock-in, and that effectively means that our approach is not to lock our customer into any kind of situation. It's to help our customer evolve. And because of the way we are serving our customers, we believe we earn the trust of our customer, and the customer wants to evolve with us. I think that's a much better relationship and a much better situation where the customer feels you're maniacally focused on their value and their outcomes. And that your only job is not to migrate them from one release to another release.
Right.
But that's the way the traditional software companies have been thinking, right? Next release, what will I get as my uplift on that release? What next module can I charge for, etc.? We're not thinking modules. The fact that we stop benchmarking against traditional ERP, we do not think in modules, functionalities, and features. We think in outcomes. This is the process. What is the outcome on that process? How do we change the outcome for the manufacturer? And then the manufacturer wants to partner with us. That is the way that we are working.
Right, right. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'd love to hear from the audience too on whether you think ERP is dead. Is ERP as we know it, is it dead? Is it going to be a system of record going forward? Will it be the system of innovation? Will it be both? Love to hear your feedback on that. Here's a question from Ermin again on YouTube. Ermin says, let's see if I can find it. Will AI make ERP vendors like SAP more valuable, or will AI platforms increasingly sit above ERP systems and commoditize them? And I guess that's the question I have for the audience too. I'd love to hear the audience's take on this, but what's your take on that?
Well, my take is very simple, which is like, we have the trust of our customers. If we focus on what's valuable for our customers will want to continue the journey with us. If we lose the focus on what's valuable for the customers, they will look to these AI layers, and then they will basically seek to push down the ERP partner to mostly like a database, basically, and that data will be accessed through the agentic layers, and that's where the value resides. So that is why, when actually in March 2025, when I started at QAD, one of the first things for us was to make the company AI first, pivot to really building our champion AI and delivering champion AI. So, that I think is very important, that we are able to bring that value of AI to our customers ourselves without causing big business disruption.
Yeah.
So I think that's the prerequisite. If you don't do that, I fully agree that you're going to get pushed down into some sort of a smart database layer.
Yeah, it's just a glorified, really expensive database if we get to that point.
Yeah.
Here's another question on YouTube from Gian. Based on your experience, in which business units or specific processes have you seen the best fit for AI? And where is AI still struggling to add any meaningful value? Do you have any examples of both?
Yeah. We have been very ruthless, I guess, in terms of what agents we are going to build. Because I think, every day I hear these, massive claims. Oh, we launched 1,000 agents, 500 agents. And then when I ask these CEOs, how much revenue have you got from these agents? And then, there's crickets, right?
Okay.
There's no answer there, because these agents are not focused on real specific value or use cases or real quantifiable outcomes. So we've only launched eight agents so far, and we've GA'd them. But each of our agents are specifically driving revenue. We have specific SKUs defined on those agents, and our customers buy those SKUs, and we allocate that as specific AI revenue. And I can tell you that I'm very, very maniacally focused on that. I don't want anybody to disguise it as cloud revenue and this. No, I want to know, where is my customer willing to pay for AI? So to answer your question, where have we seen that? We have seen that definitely on the procurement side, where I gave you the example of the messy inbox agent. Right. We have seen that also on the sales RFQ side, because a lot of these companies have to respond to RFQs, and they've got to, that whole process is very inefficient, the way companies, like manufacturers, have to respond to it. So agents on that side are also being used by our customers. We have seen customers on inventory carrying cost. Let's say in a mid-market, so maybe, a manufacturer that's between $1 billion to $10 billion in size, inventory carrying cost is one of the top 5 cost categories. And agents can look across the entire supply chain, can figure out what are the inbound lead times, where are things delivered to which lead time really, rather than what's in the system, etc. And so can help planners adjust the replenishment levels in such a way to balance out risk of a stock out. Right. And often human beings are a lot more conservative than what the agents can come up with. So we have observed over a period of time that customers can actually reduce inventory carrying costs by 15 to 25%.
Right.
So those kind of agents. Then there are other agents that are effectively, kind of on persona-based agents. So you take a planner, or you take a scheduler, or you take a operator on the shop floor, and these are agents that effectively work on their mundane tasks, things that they, can just tell the agent to do. Like if a planner has to prepare all these views to be able to really do the schedule, they can ask the agent to prepare those things overnight, and next morning they have all their views, So right. Those kind of things. So these agents are definitely gaining traction with our clients.
I like the would you call it, the maniacal focus on revenue generating
Exactly.
AI. And
If
that's,
a customer's not willing to pay for it, it's very clear that they're not getting any value out of it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think more of us should be thinking that way
yeah.
in the world of technology.
Otherwise, what are you? You just build technology for the sake of technology.
Yeah.
So,
It's easy to do in this industry.
Yeah.
I think a lot of technologists do that. So as we look to the next 12 to 24 months, what separates the winners from the laggards in manufacturing? What do you think is going to separate the winners and the losers in the next 1 to 2 years?
I think that's a really good question, right? Think about like 5 months ago and 6 months ago. I think, when I was talking to my customers, they were literally asking me, what is AI, Sanjay? How do we kind of think about AI? Today, nobody's asking that question. They're only asking, how fast can I get access to AI? How fast can I do it? So things have changed dramatically in the last 4 or 5 months, right? So I think the next 14 months are going to be quite much. Things are going to change dramatically very quickly. So I think what's going to differentiate manufacturers is speed. Speed is going to be, in my view, the differentiator. So people that sit there with their heads sort of partly buried in the sand thinking something else is going to happen, they're going to lose out, And I think speed will define how manufacturers access AI, how they use AI, how they get better decisions and faster outcomes out of AI. That's what's going to differentiate manufacturers. So I think we'll see in next 14 months, a big differentiation happening both in the manufacturing world as well as in the software world. And I think on the manufacturing side, it's going to be speed and how they make decisions. On the software side, I think what will happen is companies that have domain expertise and this maniacal focus on customer outcomes, etc., they're going to get separated from these generic layers of or application generic capabilities.
Right.
AI will pretty much make generic capabilities, will replace generic capabilities. Whereas the depth, the domain expertise, the focus on the client outcomes, and the ability to bring AI to that domain expertise is going to be a differentiation.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, how can people learn more about QAD? If I'm a manufacturer watching here today, what's the best way to learn about what you guys do?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that our capabilities are one of the most exciting softwares that you can get your hands on. So I would encourage everybody to go and try out Redzone. I've personally never seen software that exciting in my own career. But the way to get is, of course, our website, QAD Redzone, where we have all our capabilities. But we have our flagship event called Champions of Manufacturing. As I said to you, our mission is to make these manufacturers champions. So we do that in September, and it is 21st to 23rd of September in Chicago. And that's where we showcase all the innovation. We firmly believe manufacturing is not a tell me world. No media, no marketing kind of stuff. It is show me. So Champions of Manufacturing is very much focused on proof. It's focused on customers talking about how they have implemented AI. And so that's what you get to see really put your hands on it, but also get to see it and hear from our clients around how manufacturing is using AI. So that's the Champions of Manufacturing, where, of course, you can see everything about QAD Redzone.
Yeah, it's a great event. I went to it last year, and it was a really good event.
Yeah,
your first one was last year.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, thanks for being here today, Sanjay. Really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for having me, and really enjoyed the conversation. And thank you to the audience for the fantastic questions there.
Yeah, really good questions. Thanks, everyone, for watching here today. We do these live discussions every Tuesday, same time, same place. We'll edit this discussion. We'll add some additional content. It'll be released as a formal episode, a polished, finished episode of Transformation Ground Control. So by being here today on the live discussion, you're part of the live production of the podcast. So thanks for being here. You can see the podcast at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Keep up with new episodes as they're released. And you can also see all the past episodes we've done over the last 5.5 years. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com, check out the podcast, and hope to see you next week, same time, same place. Thanks again for being here. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.